Great Greed is a role-playing game for the Game Boy that's completely different from any RPG I've experienced in virtually every sense, and its allure had a hold on me from the moment I turned it on. Have you ever been pulled into a game right from the title screen? Even with the screechy bagpipe-sounding instrumentation used, the melody here was sweet and sad all at the same time, and I sat quietly listening to this haunting tune for a few minutes and took it all in. It launched my expectations high for what was sure to be a compelling medieval adventure that seemed to corroborate the label art. A man brandishes a sword, armed against an ugly beast in a forest. Surely, somewhere, there's a fine maiden locked away in a castle tower, waiting for her hero to save her. Well, it turns out that all of this is a build-up to anything but. Great Greed's instruction manual's story synopsis explicitly declares that it's not one of those long ago, once upon a time foo-foo RPGs, and instead starts out in our own modern day. We play as a boy out to test acid rain levels in a forest, and before long we're caught up in the crossfire of a great battle and accidentally get sucked into another world. After arriving in the Kingdom of Green, we learn that one of the fighters named Microwave lost her powers during the fight and is unable to send us back unless we help her find the magic book. She was in the human world to find the source of power of the game's main villain, Biohaz, who's plotting to pollute this new world we find ourselves in. It's a loose narrative that threads each of the points on our journey together, and on our quest for the book, we run into all sorts of people who've been impacted by Biohaz's forceful takeover. Our cause becomes intertwined with theirs, and we set off on our adventure through the land's 7 nations. On the surface, this game has the visual aesthetic of many others like it on the Game Boy. There are towns scattered around an overworld, and each of them is filled with tons of NPCs to chat with about the goings-on in the Green Kingdom. The story unfolds around many peculiar plot devices, including stacking an election, bribing corrupt lawmakers, participating in a beauty contest, and using spicy foods to win a race. You'll never be able to guess what's around any of the corners in this game, and that's absolutely a great thing. Its sense of humor is eccentric, and I can only compare it to something like Earthbound. There are the occasional RPG tropes here like fetch quests and rescue missions littered throughout, but the journey there is always so unique that it never feels tired or boring. This game is far from being an open-world adventure. Each section is its own chapter of sorts, and the main points of the story have to be completed before moving on to the next part. There's no backtracking allowed to earlier areas either, which makes progression feel like it's on rails. I really enjoyed having the story delivered to me this way, rather than the alternative of having free reign to wander back and forth across a huge landscape searching for the next hint to progress. This bite-sized approach to the gameplay also made it ideal for a portable game. For someone playing through casually, it would be easy to put down for a while and pick back up at a later time without having to catch back up too much. There was the occasional problem with the localization that obscured next steps from time to time, and the compartmentalization was a blessing. NPCs generally did a great job of letting you know what the next goal was, and compared to other games I've played, this was very far away from something that I'd consider to be an awful translation. For anyone hitting a wall in the game, the manual conveniently has a super hints section, which serves as a mini walkthrough to get you back on track, a common feature for a lot of games from this era. Great Greed has this wonderful habit of naming people, places, and things in its world after food and food accessories. Its name in Japan roughly translates to Vitamin Kingdom Story, making me think that a name like Great Gluttony might have been more fitting given the heavy food overtones. Throughout the adventure, we travel to places like the Empire of Sushi, Spaghetti, the Curry Nation, and the country of Escargot. The fun doesn't stop there though. Each of King Green's daughters we meet throughout the game have food-themed names as well, but the crux of the excitement comes from the names of enemies we run into. We fight everything: angry desserts, terrible vegetables, and a whole onslaught of vengeful meats. For the life of me, I couldn't quite figure out what the connection was between food and pollution, but it was a super quirky touch that kept me laughing every time we stumbled upon another disgruntled meal that was ready to murder us. One aspect of Great Greed that I really enjoyed was that you'd regularly be accompanied by different people throughout your quest. These were mainly the 5 Green Sisters, as you came across them in the different regions you visit. Even though the battle screen would always just show you versus whatever terrible food abomination you were trying to fell, the person traveling with you would lend you support in various ways during battle, like raising your offense or defense, healing you, or even laying down a blow or two to the enemy. There was no way to control these characters at all, but having their help spontaneously save your butt was a much needed leg up once in a while, especially while wandering into new territory. In addition to being active in battle, these characters also served as a compass to remind you of where to go next or what the task at hand was if you called on them from the party option in the menu. Yet another way the game helps you to stay focused and on task, something that's sorely missing from many other RPGs from this generation. Battles in this game are mostly random, save for a few set encounters with the minions of Biohazard along the way. The random battles are a frequent but necessary part of the adventure to get our main character's stats up to reputable levels in each new area. I wouldn't call Great Greed a particularly grind-heavy game, but there are some parts where grinding up a few levels certainly didn't hurt. It's really obvious when you're too weak for the area because you'll be beaten down to near death over the course of a single battle, and there's always a range of enemies to gauge your current level against. The battle system in Great Greed has to be one of the most fun I've ever played. Unlike other turn-based games, menus are completely done away with here. Instead, you can attack with your equipped weapon or defend using the A and B buttons, and different spells can be assigned to each of the 4 directions of the D-pad to be used each turn. Your actions and the enemies are executed at the same time, and with no menus to maneuver through, combat is fast-paced and exciting. It makes grinding a breeze against lower-level enemies, but there were some disadvantages to the speed. I found fights with new enemies and bosses a bit tough since there's so many text boxes popping up during each turn to let you know the damage you've inflicted as well as the enemy's move choice and whether or not your moves were effective. There's not much time to think here, but there's so much to take in. Even though fights are turn-based, if you wait too long to make a decision, the enemy can attack you. There's a balance to be struck with reading your enemy to see if you're doing any damage to them and thinking quickly to do the best thing to keep yourself from dying. The further in the game I got, the more of a challenge this became. I'd be so swept up trying to remember which button was assigned which spell that I'd be hammering an ineffective move against an enemy for a long while before I'd realize it. Magic was also extremely useful. In a lot of games I've played, elemental spells are usually at the forefront of many battles, with buffs or debuffs taking a back seat. Here though, spells like Power, Guard, and Weaken work beautifully and very rarely miss. These spells were instrumental in making it through the last stretch of the game alive. The only setback to the magic system is that there's very little explanation in-game or in the manual to tell you what each spell actually does. Every RPG is so different in the way that spells are named, and even though some of the names are really straightforward, many of them aren't. Nowadays, there are plenty of resources available online for this sort of thing, but it's challenging for a purist wanting to experience the game as it was intended at the time of its release. On the other hand, the weapons, armor, shields, and helms are very easy to get your head around. More expensive items always offer more in terms of offense or defense, and the manual was very generous in outlining this information fully. Many of the essential upgrades can be bought in towns, leaving very few things needing to be tracked down, but exploration is always a rewarding experience that can save you a lot of money by finding the same items available in stores. In stark contrast to other older RPGs, money is one resource that's always available in abundance in this game. In my case, I did do a lot of grinding to feel more comfortable in battle, and there was never a time where I felt I couldn't afford what I needed as new items became available. I finished the game with piles of unspent cash. I'm also very happy to report that there's inventory space for days. You'll have room for all the things you need to complete your quest, as well as the ability to pack away extras just to be on the safe side. This was a huge relief after the experience I had in Final Fantasy Legend, where I accidentally dropped some key items to make space for things I needed and ended up soft-locking my game. One very frustrating way the game drove its environmental message home was packing some chests full of trash. Once you'd accidentally pick it up, you'd have to pay someone else to take it off your hands. I didn't dare try to drop it anywhere to avoid becoming part of the pollution problem in the game, but my pockets were full of trash for a very long time because I was way too cheap to pay someone to take it away. I know I mentioned the title screen music earlier, but the entire soundtrack is incredible, with the exception of that horrible bleep bloop mess whenever you're indoors or in a weird forest, as horribly whimsical as it may seem. Yeah, I always tried to hurry up and get out of those places where this played as fast as I could. Given how much wandering is required in this game though, especially in a first playthrough, the rest of the music is a great companion that keeps things feeling traditional, but also keeps the mood light and fun. As usual, I don't want to say too much about how the game comes to a close, but I do want to at least mention the heightened difficulty in the final climb to the end. I felt like I was doing okay in battles leading up to that area, but unlike other parts of the game where there were occasional oases and long stretches to heal up and rest, there were no saving graces here. I had to tap into a lot of my hoarded reserves of healing items that I refused to use earlier in the game while making my way through this huge labyrinth, so all I can say is do your best to be prepared before getting in here. The enemies are absolutely brutal, and with a ridiculous encounter rate, you're going to be fighting them a lot. The final boss encounter is a real nail-biter too, and I'm sure it's very possible to get here without enough strength to pull through. There are multiple save slots available, so my recommendation would be to save a second file before the final boss fight, or even earlier in case you need to grind up a bit. I was able to finish the game around level 44, but the last battle was still a struggle and could have easily turned around on me in a moment's notice, and it did quite a few times before I finally got it. The game's ending didn't fail to impress me either. It was right on par with the rest of the game's sense of humor if you so chose to take things in an unexpected direction. It pays off to reload your game here a few times and test the waters to see all the possibilities for both your future and the future of the Green Kingdom. Great Greed is a culmination of so many things I've wanted to see in an RPG the entire time I've been exploring the genre. I was especially impressed by the fluid and exciting battle system, and that's something I'll have a hard time leaving behind as I move on to other more traditional menu-driven turn-based games. The game's story is one of the most relatable I've encountered, and it does a great job of being lighthearted and funny, but still comes through with a thought-provoking message that's on par with the environmentalist movement of the 90s. Great Greed never saw a sequel and was the first and last of its kind, making it a truly unmatched treasure among many other greats from the Game Boy. The game's twists and turns are so brash and impulsive that its seams are bursting with adventurous appeal that shouldn't be missed by any lovers of the genre.